John Sherman's wife lit up Jackson County on Facebook the other day. It just started going public here, courtesy of some of the TV reporting in town. And she wrote here on her Facebook post, quote, "Unfortunately, neither team will work with Jackson County again." From Marnie Sherman on her Facebook page, responding to some of the comments after the vote yes went up in flames on Tuesday. She writes here, they've been working behind the scenes for 2 years attempting to get a location approved, which was, I think, Frank White's plan all along. In any case, most unfortunate for sports fans in KC. The lack of leadership has lost the city 2 treasured assets. I mean, if you don't support the Chiefs after 3 Super Bowl wins, why would they stay? We will be lucky if both teams wind up in Kansas, at least still in the area. Those are Facebook comments from John Sherman's wife, Marnie, and they started going viral here, at least locally, over the last 24 hours or so. Now, listen, I get it. She was obviously very much emotionally invested in this as the owner of, as the wife of the owner. Like, you totally get it. A lot of emotions across the board. Now, do I think that neither team will work with Jackson County again? No, I don't. I think when the dust settles and people calm down across the board, there hopefully will be an opportunity to say, let's try this again and let's go about it the right way. Now, has Frank White burned bridges? Absolutely. Is Frank White a sympathetic figure in any of this? Hell no. But both sides made mistakes here throughout the entire process. The teams made mistakes. Frank White made mistakes. The legislature made mistakes. The city made mistakes. Everybody screwed this up in some capacity. It's not one person's fault. It's not one side's fault. It's not one group's fault. Everyone screwed up. That's what made this a perfect storm of a colossal failure. But in the end, money is going to talk. And if there is a deal to be had with Jackson County that is in the best interest of the teams, that helps the Royals achieve their goals of downtown baseball, then that's what's going to happen. The saving grace here could be the state of Missouri. I need to get Mike Parson on the show early next week to figure out where he's at, where the state is at on this. I know the state's not going to just back up the dump trucks for these teams. Mike Parson is not going to do that. I mean, he's not going to do it. He can't do it. It's just not going to happen. There's a month left or so in the legislative session. He's not going to jam in a few $100 million for the teams after the voters just said no thanks. They might have kicked in something if the yes vote went out, but that's not going to happen. But the state of Missouri may ultimately end up getting involved. But what's interesting is that Jay Ashcroft said on this radio station the other day, he's the Secretary of State. He's running to be the next governor. He told Ray Stevens, who's on from 10 to noon here, that there will be no money for sports teams. He said what he would do is try to eliminate the state income tax and just try to make it very, very valuable to the teams to stay here from a business and a tax climate perspective, which is, in a perfect world, that's great. But you know as well as I do, the teams may still ultimately have that handout in some capacity. What that looks like, I don't know. But I think it's indisputable right now. If Ashcroft says he's not going to do it when or if he becomes Missouri governor next year, later this year, would take office next year, you know that Bill Eigel, he's another one of the main guys running for office, running for governor of Missouri. He's not going to do it. Mike Kehoe might. I mean, he might be more willing to do something like that. And I say that just because he has been very instrumental in bringing things like the World Cup to Kansas City. He's played a big role in that from a state level. So he may be more willing. I don't have him on record saying that, but I would just say of the three, he'd be the most willing to potentially involve state monies for the two teams to stay in the state of Missouri. But I can't sit here and say that things are done in Jackson County. I get when you've been through this for the last bunch of years, as she has, why you would feel that way. But it still makes a tremendous amount of sense to at least continue the conversation with Jackson County, if nothing else from a negotiating standpoint, right? If you're the Royals, why would you say Jackson County's off the table? Because then you're going to go to Clay County, or you're going to go to Kansas, and they're going to sit there and they're going to say what? Well, what's your leverage here? You said you won't go back to Jackson, so just from a pure negotiating 101 perspective, why would you go out there publicly and say you're done with Jackson? That would be foolish. You would be best served from your own interests to negotiate with Jackson, with Clay, and then if you want to open up the door to the state of Kansas, you should do that too, John Anthony.
I'm wondering, too, for the Chiefs' part, they're kind of swept along in this, right? Initially, we were talking about building a stadium and the whole deal, East Village, et cetera, maybe north of the river. And the Chiefs have come along because they're part of the dual deal. I don't know the Chiefs had any beef with Jackson County, per se, not in the same manner the Royals might feel like, right?
That's a good point, too, and I think if you had broken up these things and you said on the ballot, the Chiefs 3/16 of a cent sales tax, because take 3/8 divided by 2. Each team was getting 3/16. 3/16 for the Chiefs, 3/16 for the Royals. The Chiefs would have probably passed. Now, what about the Kansas side of the state line? KCK acting mayor spoke to KMBC Channel 9 yesterday in a package, and here's what he had to say about the Kansas side of the state line.
However, acting KCK Mayor Tom Burrows believes Missouri leaders will do everything they can to keep the teams in their state.
I think it's a little too early right now to jump out and say, the Chiefs are leaving, the Royals are leaving, they're coming to Kansas.
But Abarca says for Jackson County, it's a big swing and a miss.
I don't know what else we can do.
All right, cut off Manny Abarca. I'm not listening to that crap on Friday, okay? I'm having a good day. It's the end of the week. I'm not listening to that, two-bit huckster on a Friday morning. I'm not doing it. I mean, he is. I've never seen someone on a local level whore themselves out for 3-second media hits like Manny Abarca has, a Jackson County legislator. It has just been so pathetic.
We kind of need to redefine terms because I know some lawyers get a bum rap for being ambulance chasers. But
yeah.
Manny, I think, does he live at the TV trucks? Because has he not been on every day this week?
Every day. I mean, I'm convinced that he pleasures himself by watching himself on local TV. Like, I genuinely believe that. Like, I think he has probably his assistant piecemeal together and compile different interviews of himself on local news. And then, he just takes his lunch break and pleasures himself watching the videos. Serious. Why are you guys laughing? I think that's a legitimate possibility. It's just really pathetic.
You never know.
You never know. Famous
the
last
things that
words.
I would say if this were unfiltered in a $39.95 subscription.
Well,
right?
Save it, John. save it. I don't want to get us in more trouble than I get us into every day. All right. Bottom of the hour, Mark Falter's going to be here from the Retirement Income Hour, react to the jobs report that came out last month, hotter than expected. Coming up, I want to compare two of the biggest stars in music and how their covers have been treated differently. Luke Combs versus Beyonce. They have each put out some huge covers in the last few months. And the way that they have been treated by media in those covers is very telling based on our cultural conversations today. We'll do it next on KCMO 95.7 FM. Luke Combs with one of the biggest hits of the past year, Fast Car. Of course, a remake of Tracy Chapman's hit single from going back 35 years now. Really, there's been no bigger song mainstream over the last 7, 8, 9 months than that song. But remember last summer, and we took you through some of the criticism that Luke Combs received for that, completely out of left field and unnecessarily. There were a lot of pieces written about Luke Combs, like this piece in the Washington Post from last summer that read, Tracy Chapman, Luke Combs, and the complicated response to Fast Car. And here's part of what that article wrote. They wrote here, to quite a few people, this is cause yet for another celebration in Luke Combs' whirlwind journey as the genre's reigning megastar with 16 consecutive number one hits. But it also has prompted a wave of complicated feelings among some listeners and in the Nashville music community. Although many are thrilled to see Fast Car back in the spotlight and a new generation discovering Chapman's work, it's clouded by the fact that as a black queer woman, Chapman, 59, would have almost zero chance of that achievement herself in country music. Now, of course, that song won numerous awards and was one of the biggest hits of its time. But everything has to be about race, has to be about filling in boxes, has to be about achieving certain agendas and narratives. So that was the response in large part to Luke Combs innocently taking Tracy Chapman's song, remaking it, and by the way, making her a tremendous amount of money in the process, I will add, John Anthony, with that remake.
Or maybe and they didn't bother to celebrate that the song was so good it crosses multi-genres, that you can do the song as a country song.
Yes.
Hers is more of just a folk song.
Yes. Very good point. It became very mainstream. You're right. All those things are true.
How good of a song it was, how well it was written.
Yes. And to Tracy Chapman's credit, she has done nothing but praise Luke Combs and his remake. She sang it with him at the Grammys. She did not take pot shots. She did not make this about race at all. And I give her tremendous credit, and we all should give her tremendous credit for not buying in to that mainstream BS narrative that came out of this. And Luke Combs also never really commented on stuff like this to the Washington Post, and good for him to telling them to, take a hike. But now compare this to a cover that's out right now. Beyonce has covered Blackbird in her newest album, Cowboy Carter. Beyonce's going for the country angle. I'm not a huge fan of it. I've heard, the one that's really getting a lot of attention, the Texas Hold'em song, I think it is.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, it's not doing it for me. But the approach to how the media is covering this and how the people involved are covering this is quite telling based on the cultural narrative of the moment. With Paul McCartney, he's given nothing but praise for Beyonce. Now, I'm okay with that. Just like Tracy Chapman was, praising Luke Combs, Paul McCartney praising Beyonce is great. But the way the media writes about these two is also very different.
You don't say.
Yes, that? Exactly. You don't say. Here's the article. I saw this on Channel 9, KMBC's website, but it wasn't written locally. It was one of those, syndicated pieces that get sent out to all the TV station websites. So they're right here. Paul McCartney has nothing but praise for Beyonce's cover of Blackbird on her newest album, Cowboy Carter. McCartney released a statement saying, "I am so happy with Beyonce's version of my song, Blackbird. I think she does a magnificent version of it, and it reinforces the civil rights message that inspired me to write the song in the first place. I think Beyonce has done a fab version and would urge anyone who has not yet heard it to check it out. You're going to love it." Article goes on to note, McCartney also shared the two had spoken before the release. Beyonce thanked him for not only letting her do a cover of the song, but also for writing the song in general. McCartney went on to explain the history of Blackbird, saying it was inspired by the civil rights movement. So now, what is it? These people, they want it to be 1968. They literally want it to be Beyonce is going to act and rewrite and remake a song about the civil rights movement in 2024 as one of the most powerful, influential people of our time, and act like and pull out the victim card like it's 1968 all over again? Are you kidding me?
We should take the blueprint of the article and juxtapose the story. So we would say, McCartney, a pale Englishman who scarcely would have had a chance of getting his original composition on the country chart at that time.
That's right. That's right.
Why
That's
not?
right. Yes, his little accent would have never made the country charts in 1968.
A British guy on the country chart?
Yeah. Let's reverse the roles.
New York City.
Yeah. Well, right now you're listening. You're an early morning listener, obviously, and we hope that you're listening as long as you can as the day goes on, even if it's on the app, on the smart speakers. Tell your Alexa, tell your Google Home to play KCMO Talk Radio. But if you missed this yesterday late in the show, we had on Tony Bateo of Tony's Kansas City fame. He's been running that site for, decades now in this town. Real newsman, unlike the hacks over at the Kansas City Star and elsewhere. Anyway, Tony was on yesterday, and he dropped this little nugget on this show about Frank White's future. Here's what he had to say.
I know people who go from town to town collecting petitions. They have expressed an interest in the current Frank White petition to recall, which is ongoing. They have a Facebook group of about 2,000 people, very active, maybe one of the forces that turned the tide in this election. And they may find in the next, and this is bloggy stuff, caveat, here's my grain of salt, they may find they might get some additional funding to their efforts in the very near future.
How about that? Frank White, the recall effort, that's kind of petered out at this point. It had a little bit of juice last summer as the assessment thing was going on. But here's the problem. The people that oftentimes get behind these recall petitions, like the Mayor Lucas petition, which was just a joke, like it's done in a very partisan way. So people are like, no, screw it. Like even Democrats who may not like Quentin Lucas or may not like Frank White, they don't want to sign the petition because, well, they don't want to help Republicans. And trust me, there's a lot of Republicans who kind of get in their own way around here. Just a lot of them. So if you get a well-organized, bipartisan or nonpartisan group of people with money behind them who actually are interested in getting Frank White out and recalling the Jackson County executive, well, then you've got something. And if it is funded in part behind the scenes by the teams themselves, then you've got something. That might be the thing they're waiting to do to basically kick Frank White out of office and then start renegotiating again with Jackson County. But I would tell them this. If you want to do that, that's fine. Trust me, I'm not shedding any crocodile tears here. Where were you in 22? Where were you when Frank White was actually on the ballot? Where was the Hunt family then? Not that the Hunt family had to have like some, big fundraiser on behalf of taking out Frank White or anything like that, but that was a big deal in this town at that time. Now, I know it was 22. A lot of other elections were taking place. It was the midterms. But it's like, we're worrying about these issues here on the ground. We're talking about those elections here on the ground. And there was not a lot of attention and a lot of interest, broadly speaking, at the regional level about that race between Teresa Galvin, a former Jackson County legislator, and Frank White. And Frank rolled to re-election without really campaigning. Don't forget, Frank White didn't really campaign. There was not a lot of yard signs up. There was not a lot of anything that Frank White was doing. Teresa Galvin hustled pretty well, and she lost by 10 points. It wasn't even close. And in large part, that was because of Kansas City, Missouri proper, which blew it out on behalf of Frank White in Jackson County. And that's how we ended up with another 4 years of this and a situation that appears to be untenable between the counties and the teams. So it's not like for a lot of people, John, in this town, they just woke up in the last couple of weeks and were like, wow, this process is screwed.
Yeah, I guess as a sidebar, I was looking at numbers that I was quoting yesterday from the Kansas City Election Board, the Board of Elections. And so that was one where early voting had Frank way out in front. And we talked to Jonathan earlier, a poll worker for this vote on Tuesday, saying, man, once that pre-vote gets out, it's kind of hard to recover. He can see that, or did see it.
Yeah, with the no votes on Tuesday.
Right, and kind of same thing with Frank. Once he got out in front there on early voting.
It's hard to catch up.
It's kind of hard, yeah. Seemingly.
You're not going to catch up. And that's what happened with Frank White in 22. And now he ends up, winning again. And listen, the county's been through a lot of crap here the last not even 18 months that he got reelected. You had the assessment debacles that still no one's really doing anything about. No one's paid any kind of political price or any type of, employment price for that disaster. Gail McCann Beatty is still in a job, which is just, beyond disturbing. And then, of course, you got this issue with the stadiums. So all in all, it's a mess. And it's one of those things that regardless of how you feel about how Tuesday went, if you care about the future of the county, this is not going to be the last thing that gets screwed up. It's not going to be the last thing that needs solving. It's just going to be the latest thing. There's always going to be a latest thing when it comes to Jackson County, as long as it's led by the people that it's led by. at the legislative level and at the executive level. And that is not changing anytime soon. 913-408-7957. That's our studio line and our text line here on KCMO. Pete, I still blame Bidenomics for the results. People are suffering. Hopefully, this will be reflected in November. I can't speak to November. I just don't know whether or not people are truly going to go to the polls in November, and it's going to be about what's in their best interests. Donald Trump is such a unique figure that you can't simply look at it through the prism of Bidenomics. If the election becomes about Bidenomics, that's a very good setup for Donald Trump. If Donald Trump makes this election about himself, then you know what? It's anybody's guess. That's what it's going to come down to. And that's how this election is going to play out. It won't just be about whether or not Bidenomics is the top issue. So we're going to have to see how this plays out as we roll through the next several months on KCMO. But I would be hesitant to read too much into November based on what happened here in Jackson County. Very hesitant on that front. Coming up next on KCMO Talk Radio, I got to give credit to Gen Z. They are doing something I've been advocating for a very long time. If you're a parent, I want to hear from you on this and much more next on KCMO. You know, everybody likes to rag on Gen Z. It's like millennials 15 years ago, of which I am. It was easy. It always is easy to rag on the youngest generation. But you got to give them credit where it's due in this case. And if you're a parent, no matter how old your kids are, I think you'll appreciate this trend that apparently is taking over, I don't want to say a large segment of Gen Z, but at least a partial segment of Gen Z. Happy Friday. It's great to be here on KCMO 95.7 FM. Here's the headline from the New York Post. Gen Z is giving up smartphones for flip phones. And it goes on to highlight how more and more school districts across the country are banning cell phone use. By the way, that's a good thing in my book. You've got politicians like Ron DeSantis barring kids under 14 from social media. You have people starting to wake up and psychologists and experts starting to write and promote the fact that we have created a very anxious generation filled with mental illness. And in part, you can point back to the phone and social media. Their minds just can't comprehend it. They can't adjust to how that's not the real world in the way that our minds can as adults, right? So the article goes on to note that more and more young people, Gen Zers, are swapping out their smartphones for what they're calling dumb phones, like flip phones and Nokias, to reclaim their time and their mental health. Now, I remember getting my first Nokia back in the day. Man, that thing didn't seem all that dumb. That thing was smart 20 plus years ago, I'll tell you. Thing was brilliant. But now, of course, that's considered a dumb phone. So what you've got going on is the story highlights several Gen Zers who've gone retro with their cell phone. And there's a common theme for all of them. They basically had enough. The first story they talk about here is Sammy. She was 12 when she got her first iPhone. She was the last kid in her entire grade to do so. Think about that. She was 12 and she was the last kid in her grade to get a smartphone. Now, she's 19 today, so go back 7 years. That's 2017. This is where I feel for Gen X parents. Gen X parents didn't grow up with really any social media like those of us who are millennials did. So when the smartphones came out, they were just kind of giving them to kids like they were candy. They didn't think anything of it. I believe, and I say this as a millennial parent, I believe millennial parents are starting to realize some of the pitfalls, not only because the data is coming out showing that kids' mental health is severely impacted, potentially negatively, by way too much phone and social media use in general. So, but also because we grew up with it more than Gen Xers did. You know, we grew up and we had Facebook when we went to college. Twitter and all these things were part of our college or shortly thereafter experience. And now all these years later, you've got people waking up to the fact that when you're 12, 13, 14 years old, you just can't comprehend it. Like, yeah, I had a dopey flip phone back in high school, but that was nothing compared to what you're doing now on your phone. That was to make a phone call and to do the old T9 texting. Mark remembers T9 texting. I'm sure he was an expert at T9 texting, weren't you?
I was late to the cell phone game.
You were?
Yeah, I didn't get one until my sophomore year in college.
Oh, you got that long without a cell phone?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I was using my roommate's cell phone to call my girlfriend in my freshman year of college.
How are you calling your bookie? That's what I want to know.
I didn't have anything back then. I didn't have anything to bet on.
Oh, please. I don't want to hear about
Mid-America,
that.
we weren't doing that stuff
I
there.
know. Oh, yeah. No betting at Mid-America Nazarene.
No.
You keep that storyline up. I don't believe you for 2 seconds. But okay. You can say that on the air just to kind of sound pure.
I did jump into a pool once with my first phone, which was terrible.
Oh,
had to get the
gosh.
rice out and everything else.
Oh, you broke the rice out.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I think that for our generation, though, realizing the downfalls and the pitfalls of what these phones bring to young people is critical. And now you've got Gen Zers basically taking these matters into their own hands. This girl, Sammy, who's now 19, she said that she got her phone at 12, and she said the endless scroll was so addicting. It only got worse a few years later when the world locked down for the pandemic. So think about this. These kids are vulnerable. It's COVID. They're 14, 15, 16 years old. They're locked up in their homes. They can't go to school. They can't visit with their, friends, their teachers. And all they've got is their phone. Their whole world is on that phone at an age when their brain can't process this stuff. The amount of damage, and I almost made the mistake of saying COVID did, but it really was our response to COVID. It wasn't COVID itself. The amount of damage that we have potentially done to young people in general and the next generation due to our government's response to COVID should never be forgotten. And this is another example of that. But I give, these young people credit because they're talking in this article to the New York Post, and they're saying now what they're doing is they're going back to flip phones. Now, some of them are only doing it when they're going out, like with friends and stuff, because one thing they noticed is that they'd go to parties in college and everyone's just sitting there on their phones. Like, what's the point of that? You literally are going out at a party in college and you're sitting there on your phone. Why? What is the purpose of any of that? But to their credit, they recognized it. They acknowledged it. And what they do is when they go out, they have their flip phone for emergencies. If you got to call me, well, something happens, you call the flip phone. That's what you got it there for. But it makes all the sense in the world. And apparently, this is crazy, but apparently the flip phone is becoming a fashion trend. That is something I never thought I'd see. This is getting totally wild.
This is absolutely lit. This is lit.
It is getting lit when the flip phone's becoming a fashion trend.
So they have it on their side, or they wear it on their pockets?
Well, I don't know, if they walk around with it to show it off as they're going through school or what's going on. But this one girl, she's 20 years old. She said, I feel like the iPhone kind of cut my childhood short. But using a flip phone reminds me of the early 2000s when I was little, and it feels really nostalgic. Are we getting nostalgic for simpler times? For times when we didn't have literally every piece of information at our fingertips? Are we going to have this digital revolution where people finally, and listen, I'm guilty of this. I am on the social media apps. I talk about how you can follow my content on these social media apps. It's frankly part of my job. I don't always love that part of it, but it is part of the job. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. I tried Snapchat years ago and got rid of it, but I'm on all those things. John got kicked off Twitter after one day, so he's not there.
You've heard me grumble in the hall and off the air over the years that this has reached the point of diminishing returns.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And
Grumble.
if young people are going to lead the way on that, then you know what? More power to them.
Exactly. Well, they're primary users, right?
Yeah,
I mean, as a
absolutely.
boomer, I don't know. I mean, if I just got rid of the flip phone simply to be cool.
Yeah.
You know, be one of the cool kids. Get off that MySpace thing and AOL.com. My flip phone. I just thought it was cool to wrist flip it, you know.
That's right.
I was never a smoker with a Zippo, so wrist flipping a phone was really cool. Like you're a spy, super agent or something.
Yep.
But yeah, I see what you're saying.
Oh, man.
But of course, it's easy for me. I realize this is a phone.
Yeah.
I use it to call people, but my son, you know, it's a texting machine camera.
It is. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And that's what it is for me, you know, and for many of us. So, like, I'm not sitting here saying I'm pure on this. I can do better. I think we all could probably do better. But you look at it and you say to yourself, does this make sense, especially as a parent? My kids are only 5'3" in 3 weeks, so I've got a ways to go on this. But I can tell you right now, I hope the trend to giving young people flip phones becomes a thing, and I'm not in this place of, when do you give them a smartphone? Everyone else, hey, Dad, everyone else has the iPhone. When am I getting one? I don't care. Not in this house, damn it. I mean, I don't mind being the old man, but I would prefer it if societally we all came to this conclusion together that the flip phone is the best way to handle young people's mental health. Get them a phone to communicate on a per-need basis. And I also would suggest that schools, by and large, do ban these phones, because I can't imagine being a teacher trying to keep 14-year-old kids off their damn smartphones.
I think it's great that we ascertain the information we have. I don't know if we need to think of doing better, but certainly improving, right?
Yes.
And so unlike television or things where you just keep it going, it was like, what was that? What was the effect of television and the sugar cereal commercials on kids and smoking commercials? You know, we just kind of let stuff play out. This is nice to see where we're kind of moving in real time, if you will.
Yeah.
Now, it takes 10 years. You can't just figure this out in 2.
Yeah.
It takes a few years.
We're making progress,
but we're seeing
though.
it. I think it is progress.
I absolutely believe it's progress. On the text line, 913-408-7957. Pete, I want to go back to the landline with a rotary phone. Millennials are saying, what's a rotary phone? What are you guys talking about with these rotary phones? What's this all about?
Careful what you wish for.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you're talking about now. Yeah, be careful what you wish. I don't want to go back to that. Come on now.
I'm a music guy, right? We go to CDs. Hey, it sounds great. Put on the CD and listen to it. Hey, vinyl's back. Cool. I got my albums. I'll get my album. I'll put it on. Listen to it. Wait. Yeah, this album side's over in 20 minutes. I got to go flip the dang thing over.
Yeah, I got to
CD
get up.
plays all the way through. So be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. 913-408-7957. Especially parents, because, once again, my kids are too young, so they're not experiencing this right now in the classrooms. But I got to imagine one of the biggest impediments to teaching kids right now has got to be the dopey phone. Another win to getting these things out of kids' hands. 913-408-7957. We've got a lot coming up throughout the morning. The jobs report is going to be out at 7:35, so don't miss that. That'll play a big role in what the markets do today and, what we're looking at going forward for the rest of the year here in 2024 when it comes to the stock market, when it comes to the economy, and when it comes to interest rates. That's in 45 minutes on 95.7 FM. Only Joe Biden could screw this up this poorly. I mean, it really is incompetency at its finest on a Friday morning on KCMO. This is the lead story right now on the Wall Street Journal's website. Why immigration is now the number one issue for voters. It says here the topic, a weak spot for Biden, ranks as more important than inflation and the economy, according to recent polls. Now, remember, you might sit there and look at that and say, that's just like a Republican talking point issue. Most normal people aren't caring about this. No, that's the point. Now, normal people are. It's the number one issue, according to voters, in a new Wall Street Journal poll that was conducted, and it found that 20% of voters now rank immigration as their top issue, up from 13% in December. In the same poll, 65% of voters. That's not all partisan MAGA hat-wearing Republicans, all right? That's 65% of voters said they disapprove of grandpa's handling of border security. And 71% said developments in immigration and border security are headed in the wrong direction.
Come on, man.
Sorry, they are. Anyone with a brain and pulse can see that. Another survey conducted last month of registered voters in 7 swing states, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, found immigration to be among the top 2 issues in every state, with at least 72% of respondents in each of the states saying the country's immigration policy and border security were headed in the wrong direction. People are seeing the impacts in their own communities. People are feeling the impacts in their own communities. And they might not be feeling it in places like Wokewood, but they are feeling it in places like KCK and KCMO, depending on where you're at. Talk to people there. They will tell you about it. Talk to law enforcement in those communities. They will tell you about it. And that is what is making this, when you flood a country with 10 million people over the last 3 years, this is what you get. You get chaos, and you get people waking up to it and saying, hey, this is not sustainable. And let me add this too. Let's just call it like it is. If Joe Biden thought for a second, and the people around him, that these people would eventually come here and become Republicans, like hell, they'd be saying, build the wall, build the wall. Like they would be the ones who would be popping up a wall as quickly as they could. Now, it's not about voting to me. It shouldn't be about voting. It should be what's like in the best interest of any country. What is a humane way to go about running a country's immigration system? Of course, this ain't it. There is no defending the immigration policies or lack thereof of the people in charge right now. You just can't do it. You could try, but you can't do it with a straight face. You can't do it without somebody laughing you out of the room.
He's a nut
You
job.
just can't do it. So now suddenly the voters are waking up. The voters are waking up, and the voters are realizing this is not sustainable. And it has become the issue that is bigger than the economy, bigger than inflation. Now, to me, they're still 1, 2, 2, 1, whatever order you want to put them in. But no matter how you spin it, the fact that they've screwed this up so badly that now it's the number one issue per voters, and it's not cutting in their favor, by the way. It's a number one issue that breaks against Joe Biden by a 2-1 margin. That is a horrible sign come this fall. Now, what does Trump do about it? That's the other side of this. All Trump needs to do is have very low levels of rhetoric and point out the obvious. That Joe Biden's approach on immigration is obviously a failure, is not working, and is putting every single American in danger. You've got, there has been a push of young Chinese national men coming across the southern border. That's been a big push as of late. We've talked about that. You have people from every corner of the world, when large parts of the world are on total fire and want to see the destruction of the United States, we have an open border. Think about that, right? Now, here we are trying to figure out what to do about it. Donald Trump does not need to go down the Donald Trump rabbit hole. He should not be talking necessarily in Trumpian ways. I know that's a big ask, asking Donald Trump to not talk like Donald Trump. That's a tall ask. I understand what I just did here. But it's important for him to do. Why? Because if he doesn't do that, the media will take some of his lines, they will take some of his rhetoric, they will twist it, they will use it against him, even if it's not telling the entire story, like the whole bloodbath drama from a couple of weeks ago, right? How that was taken out of context. But they will do that. They will take him out of context. And here's the thing, and this is, if there's one message I could give to Donald Trump in the next 7-8 months, this would be it. His rallies are great, but the rallies that he gives for the people who are diehard MAGA, and I know there's a lot of you that are, and that's totally fine. But you're not going to win the election on that. You're not. The people at the rallies are important. That's his base. But they will not win him this election. So when he goes to these things, have a blast. Have fun. Trump's an entertainer at his core. That's what he's good at. And people expect a show. But also be thinking, this is not a TV show. This is not a concert. It's about getting as many people as you possibly can, including persuadable voters in the middle, independents, to realize that for the next 4 years, we can't keep going with Biden. We just can't do it. And you got to get them, and you got to convince those people to come out on your behalf and vote for you and realize you're the way forward for the next 4 years. And just be thinking about that every single time you go to one of these rallies and start talking.